In today's portal era, very few teams return the exact leading passer, rusher, and receiver from a previous year. And that small handful of teams just so happens to have one team that's above the rest, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes. That is right. Ohio State this season is one of the only few teams in the nation who is returning their leading passer, leading rusher, and leading receiver from this past season. Ohio State, even though there are some other teams that are able to do this out there, Ohio State, I would argue, is the only team that really is like genuinely doing this. There are kind of some semantics with a few other teams that we'll get to here in a minute, but we're going to talk about why this is such a big deal for Ohio State and why this really does need to be one of Ohio State's best offensive years under Ryan Day. When continuity of what you have. You look at the offensive play caller and Arthur Smith. You look at even the continuity of what you have and the returning production of what you have at the offensive line as well. You don't necessarily have the tight ends and things like that coming in, but you do have the leading passer, the leading rusher, and the leading receiver from last season. And you definitely are going to want to check us out over at Buckeye Huddle. Please do like and subscribe here on the YouTube page to make sure you are filled in with everything that's going on with Ohio State football. Join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Me, Kevin Noon, Mark Givler, Andrew Ellis on the board with you guys, going through a lot of stuff, talking Buckeyes all the time. Sign up for the board there. Sign up for it all. We appreciate you being here, listening, liking, and subscribing, as this is the daily college football or Buckeye Huddle podcast, the Buckeye Huddle podcast, which is coming to you at daily about Ohio State and everything else that's going on. If you're on podcast, 5-star rating and review helps us out as well. Gets more people to know about the show. All right, I'm done begging. Let's talk about the big picture and just really how incredibly rare this is for this to happen. So obviously most top teams nowadays, they lose at least one of their three major statistical leaders every offseason. USC is bringing back Jaden Mayava and King Miller, but they've lost Mekhi Lemon, right? Texas A&M is bringing back their leading passer, their leading rusher, but they lost Concepcion. The number of teams, Oregon brought back Dante Moore and DeCorian Moore, but they lost Noah Whittington, right? There's a lot of teams out there. BYU actually almost did this. They brought back the Bear Bachmeyer, LJ Martin, and almost brought back Parker Kingston, but he got in some trouble and he won't be back this season for BYU. And so there are some other teams that can kind of do this here and there, but then there's a team who I would say has actually really done this, and that is Ohio State. Now, there are four other programs in college football that technically, yes, have returned their leading passer, leading rusher, and leading receiver from last season into the 2026 season. Those four other programs are actually the team up north. Bryce Underwood, Jordan Marshall, and Andrew Marsh do return next season. Bryce Underwood, obviously not a lot of great talk out of camp and stuff like that. He's learning his second offense over there at up there up north. Jordan Marshall, he did have the most rushing yards last season, but he did not clips 1,000, and really it was more of Justice Haynes that was kind of the starter for the majority of the year. And then Andrew Marsh, as much as he was the leading receiver, as we know, there was not much of receivers to look at last year with the team up north and the way that they've kind of operated with their passing game and everything else. I'm sure they'll look to revitalize that a little bit this next season, but obviously nothing super well to write home about. Oklahoma is the third team. Oklahoma is returning John Mateer. Obviously, they're leading running back from last season, leading rusher from last season, Torrey Blaylock. He had not even 500 yards rushing, but they did have three different guys who had 400 yards rushing. And then their leading receiver from last year, Isaiah Sategna, I believe is how you pronounce it. The third, he is their leading receiver. And then the two other programs are group of five programs, Delaware and then San Diego State. They return their three leading passer, leading rusher, leading receiver from last season for this year as well. But Ohio State stands above them all, as Ohio State is the only program that is returning the leading passer with over 1,000 yards, the leading rusher with over 1,000 yards, and the leading receiver with over 1,000 yards. John Mateer threw for a good amount of yards last year. Bryce Underwood threw for some yards last year, but neither of them were anything spectacular. Marshall did not clip yards. Torrey Blaylock did not even eclipse 500 yards. Andrew Marsh did not eclipse 1,000 yards. And then Isaiah Sategna, I believe he was just under 1,000 yards receiving as well. And so it does make a big deal for Ohio State to be the only team that is returning that much production. When you look at the returning production, Ohio State isn't necessarily, killing it in the returning production end. You have teams like Notre Dame, Maryland that are doing well at the top of the returning production. But if you look at those trends from year to year, the entire returning production is not generally a great thing to be at the top of. Years before that, you had teams like Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech and Illinois last year that were returning all of this production, but they were not able to capitalize on it and improve the next season. Typically, these teams that are very high in returning production do not improve from what they were the season before, because a lot of these teams have to bring guys back that either weren't good enough for the NFL, or they're bringing guys in through the transfer portal that make their returning production look better, but they're still learning a lot of stuff. Ohio State does not have this problem. Julian Sayin, Bo Jackson, Jeremiah Smith are all players who could not go to the NFL last year. And you could argue that if Julian Sayin went, he would have been a first-round pick. You could argue that if Jeremiah Smith went, he would have been the number 1 overall pick. He would have been up there battling with Fernando Mendoza to be, at the very least, a top 5 pick last season. And then Bo Jackson probably would have been somebody who would have got some looks. I don't think he would have been a first-round lock or anything like that. It's also very difficult to do that at the running back position, but he's somebody that's coming into next year with actual proven ability in the Big Ten and not just trying to project it. So Julian Sayin last year, 3,610 yards with elite completion percentage, about 77% last year. A lot of, people out there are kind of trying to, I don't know if it's intentionally, but trying to kind of look down on Julian Sayin a little bit and say, oh, he wasn't even the best player on his team and he just played a weak schedule and stuff. And while there is some truth to that, I also think that he played the 2 best defensive lines in the nation at the end of the year last year. And it was an offensive line that wasn't fully prepared to be able to go against those guys, against Miami and Indiana. Now you can, talk about how they should have been prepared. And I definitely think they should have been prepared. I think, play calling and game plan impacted that a little bit too. And so that's another reason why I think it's very good that you have a guy like Arthur Smith, who's not only been an offensive coordinator in the NFL, who's been a head coach in the NFL, that's coming down to be your offensive coordinator there as well. A lot of people don't realize that his production held up against even power competition. A lot of these guys who, come in and play, with a very high completion percentage or whatever else, they play really well against the kind of scrubs that they have. And then the better teams they play against, they don't often do as well. You even saw that a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit with Fernando Mendoza last year. And he was great. But obviously Julian Sayin, he's somebody who's been able to show this ability time and time again. Bo Jackson, he had over 1,000 yards rushing last season, 1,090 yards, not a ton of touchdowns, but rare for Ohio State to have a true freshman as the clear lead back and still finish with 1,000+ yards in the modern era, especially when that true freshman was not starting the year last year. This year, Bo Jackson coming off an injury. He did not participate in spring practice, so he's going to be coming off an injury into the preseason fall camp. He's going to be rejuvenated, better set up for that. And then obviously there is a lot being put on his shoulders and Isaiah West's shoulders and Jacoby Johnson's shoulders that they need to be can be explosive next season. And you're also going to have to look at the wide receivers to help them be explosive as well, because you're going to need good blocking out there on the perimeter and a guy who's going to have to lead that, not just with his receiving ability, but also his leadership to make sure other guys are blocking and out there on the edge. Jeremiah Smith, the unstoppable sophomore last season, who is going to be a junior and who better win the Blitnikoff this year. I mean, it better happen. Jeremiah Smith, he had 1,243 yards receiving last season, 12 touchdowns in 2025. A lot of people know him as the best player in college football. Miami fans will want to try to talk about Malachi Toney. He might have better stats this season. We'll see, but he is not a better player than Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith actually this season could break the Big Ten career receiving yards record for a wide receiver if he eclipses 1,061 yards on the season. So he could become the career Big Big Ten career wide receiving yards leader in just 3 years at Ohio State. That is, pretty spectacular. To do that. But that's what Jeremiah Smith does. He's always spectacular. He's always catching touchdowns, and he's just a phenomenal player. Fantastic at everything he does. So all three of these guys are leaders. They went over 1,000 yards in the main category. This almost never happens at one school in the same season. Not necessarily just because it's now, but really in the past, it's not happened all that much either. But definitely now, when you have the transfer portal and everything else that's going on, when you have guys leaving early for the draft, maybe we'll see more of this with the 5-for-5 rule coming in. And then if the Protect College Sports Act does get passed, well, that's a whole nother episode there to see if that happens. But if something like that happens and you get players not being able to transfer as much, maybe this will find some more normative that it could happen again. But at least for now in college football, with the way the transfer portal is, the way players are getting offered money place to place, and they can do all this stuff, it's not going to be very likely you see something like this, not only with just in general, but it's not going to be very often you see something like this with guys who are as talented as Julian Sayin, as Bo Jackson, as Jeremiah Smith. Right now, Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith on a lot of the betting sites out there are tied in the top 5 with Heisman odds to win the Heisman next season. Bo Jackson is, last time I looked, he was top 3 among running backs to win the Heisman next season. So there's going to be a lot of people that try to project stuff and try to say, oh, Savion Hyder over there at Michigan, or, Jordan Davison over at Oregon or whatever else. But the plain fact of the matter is that Ohio State has the proven production. Ohio State has the proven players that are coming back next season. And on top of that, you're adding in other players as well. You're adding in Chris Henry, Kyle Parker, Devin McEwen into the situation. Brandon Ennis is coming back, and he could be revitalized next season in an offense that I think is going to fit his skill set a little bit better. You're going to be seeing Johnson there, running back Isaiah West, who's going to be healthy as well. I don't think he was completely healthy last season. Nobody really is, but I think he may have had some health issues, as his play was not the same at the beginning of the season than it was at the end, or saying at the end of the season that it was at the beginning. And so you have all of these things culminate together. You look at this situation, and Ohio State is in a situation where this offense should be as good as it was back in the day, right? When Ryan Day was really going out there and was really trying to put as much offense as he possibly could out there. You get flashbacks to Michigan State when, what was it, 49-0 at halftime? It was either 49 or 42. So many points, I forget. But I mean, you should get to revisit times like that with this team, because not only do you have the leading pass rusher, the leading receiver, but you also have 4 returning offensive linemen. And a lot of people will say, well, you don't have the 5th one, but Tegra Shabola was somebody that's probably going to lose a spot this season. He's probably going to either lose a spot to Ian Moore coming in and playing left tackle, or Joshua Padilla coming in and playing right guard for him. So my biggest thing is that you have this talent returning. You have guys who are going to be set up in a good place to be able to play next year. It all just rests on the shoulders of Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith has the keys to the Ferrari essentially right now. Not a Maserati. I'm not going to start that thing that Gus Johnson started a few years ago, but he has the keys to the Ferrari. All Arthur Smith has to do is get it together. And honestly, like Ohio State, even last season, the offense wasn't the greatest at times, but even last season, Ohio State was really good moving the ball down the field. The biggest area that they struggled at was just, punching the ball in short yardage situations, fourth and inches, 3rd and 1, situations like that, 1st and goal, and you're close to the goal line there. Those are really the situations that were kind of the most difficult for Ohio State last season. And Arthur Smith is somebody that's going to be able to come in and definitely help with those situations. And so honestly, like, if you keep a lot of the passing concepts and things like that the same, which I don't think Ryan Day is going to get away from anytime soon, you keep a lot of that the same, and you just get Arthur Smith in there to have his run game schematics and everything else actually push through and make some things really clear for this offense for Ohio State. It's going to be a really, really good season for him next year. I do question, what is Ryan Day going to lean on? Because the past 2 seasons, he has really leaned on the defense, right? Jim Knowles' final year, he leaned on the defense a lot there. This past year, really felt like he didn't want to put too much on the offense, because he does want to be a little bit more, this season. You got a lot of transfers coming in with the defense. We talked about that in the last video. Go watch my last video on the summer keys for the Buckeyes. You got a lot of guys coming in there. On the offensive side, you don't have a whole lot. I mean, you got a few tight ends and things like that. Obviously, Williams and those guys that are coming in, but you got your leading receiver back, who's the best player in the country. You've got your leading rusher back, who's at the very least a top 5 running back in the country, in my opinion, in Bo Jackson. And then you've got the leading passer back, who, for my money's worth, is the best quarterback in the country. I know a lot of people will look at Julian Sayin and say, well, the way that season ended, it just wasn't good enough for me. Folks, we got to understand where Julian Sayin was at. Like, Julian Sayin going into the playoffs was playing who had started at schools for at least 2 or 3 years at this point. I mean, Marcel Reed, Carson Beck, Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore had a year starting under his belt at UCLA. Gunnar Stockton, he first full year starting as well for him, so you can talk about that. But he did start a game, but the year before that, I mean, it was a tough situation. Trinidad Chambliss, yes, his first year in FBS, but he was a very accomplished quarterback starting before he got to the FBS. Like, a lot of interesting stuff here with the way, quarterbacks did have experience. And Julian Sayin came in with virtually no experience starting in college. I mean, he played a few snaps his freshman year and clean stuff, but overall, not a whole lot of experience. He's got the experience now. He's got the best receiver in the country, the best player in the country on the outside. Smith. Arthur Smith just has to take all of these awesome pieces and just try to formulate them together. I think that Ohio State, you could see them return if they go for it. I think a lot of this just depends on coaching. If they indeed actually go for it, I think you could see them at the top 3 in a lot of these offensive categories next season. I think efficiency wise, they'll be at the top no matter what. Ohio State, Ryan Day, he very much so is even when they're going slower, he's very much so focusing on the efficiency and everything else. But if they just go with it and run with it and actually, try to implement this full-fledged offense and not try to worry about slowing the game down and not try to worry about playing conservatively for your defense and stuff like that, which, I see both sides of it personally. When you're in this situation, when you have Jeremiah Smith, Bo Jackson, Julian Sayin, you have stud wide receivers coming in like Chris Henry Jr., Kyle Parker, Devin McEwen. You've got Isaiah West to back up Bo Jackson. You got Jacoby Johnson to back him up as well. I think this is 4 offensive linemen returning, and then a guy in Ian Moore that I think he could be a very, very strong left tackle. I think he could go to the NFL after this season. We'll see what happens. But I look at this entire situation and I just say, Arthur Smith, you got it all. You got it all to have an amazing offense here to really put it together, and we'll see what Arthur Smith does with it all. All right, that's what we got here in this episode of the Buckeye Huddle podcast. Check us out at buckeyehuddle.com. Like I said, me, Mark Givler, Kevin Noon, Andrew Ellis over there on the board. You can read Mark's recruiting columns and things like that. A lot of good recruiting coverage by Mark. For my money, he's the best in the business doing it out there. So go check it out and come back tomorrow for the Buckeye Huddle podcast. We'll have more episodes for you like this. We cover it all. Sometimes recruiting, sometimes X's and O's, sometimes, interesting stats like this. We got it all for you here at the Buckeye Huddle podcast. Like, subscribe, 5-star rating review always helps us out as well. We appreciate you being here. Have a good one.